Hey everybody, Mike B with a new series I've been wanting to start for a while. Just didn't know if there was going to be any interest in it, but obviously there is. I've been doing a couple of videos with jungle fatigues and wearing the Vietnam era M1 helmet with all that stuff, and we're getting a lot of good feedback. I guess people got Vietnam on their mind, and rightfully so. So I'm going to start a new series. It's not going to really get into the macro level of why we got involved, this and that, and all that stuff. I'm just gonna be talking about some of the gear and like some of the stuff that the Joes kind of did and what they wore, what they would, whatever. Just solely from my historical research. I understand a lot of Vietnam vets are viewers of mine, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I've talked to a lot of Vietnam vets and have some good friends that are Vietnam vets. Most of them are still alive, and they've told me their experiences, and everybody's experience is really different. There's some crossover about combat and stuff like that. It's relatively the same, but even that there's a lot of differences in exactly how that went down. So with any conflict, everybody's experience is going to be different. So I'm just going to kind of pick and pull from what I've heard and read and seen in photographic and video evidence and interviews with Vietnam vets after the fact and whatever to kind of make this series regarding the equipment and just kind of the micro level history of the Vietnam War. So obviously 1963 if you want to go back to 1959, we started sending people there. 63 we started ramping it up with the advisory role and all that stuff, and this is as macro as I'm going to get. And in 1965 is when we started really sending people over there in large numbers. So with that, in 1965, most of the soldiers were going to be equipped with the olive green 107 sateen fatigues, which are just like a heavier cotton. It's like the straight pocket. There's two, like if you've seen We Were Soldiers, like everybody's seen that. It's the ones that they were wearing, the straight pockets. They had mostly colored insignia, colored ranks, all that stuff. It's the stateside uniform for the United States. Now, when they got to Vietnam, they kind of figured out, and the advisors have been saying this, but they kind of figured out that uniform was way too heavy and hot and didn't really breathe that well because it wasn't designed for jungle warfare or that environment in general. Even if you're down south in the Delta, it's still hotter than a rattlesnake's taint. It's miserable in that country. That's one consistent thing about everybody said. They said, "My God, was it fucking hot?" I'm like, yeah, I can understand. I can relate. I was in a dry heat, but I could not imagine it being that hot with 90% humidity. That would just, oh man. But anyway, I suppose your body acclimates and stuff. But most of the vets that I've talked to said you get there, get off the plane, you are drenched in sweat, and you don't get undrenched until you get back in the United States. So that's pretty consistent. So anyway, imagine wearing heavier cotton, twill material as a uniform during combat. It would be pretty uncomfortable would be the word, and just kind of inconvenient. So I think about 1963, they started trying to figure out, okay, is there a better uniform that we could issue in mass to our soldiers that would actually allow them to perform better and be more comfortable in a jungle fighting environment. So the illustrious military and their research labs and development decided to go back in time a little bit to the 1942 era and take the 1942 pattern airborne jump uniform, right, with the slanted pockets. You familiar? Everybody's seen Band of Brothers because that's the only thing that happened in World War II. So it's their D-Day uniforms pretty much. You get the cargo pants, the leg ties to support the weight of the pockets. They don't rub up against your thighs. You got the slanted pockets and all that stuff, but they're still pretty damn heavy. They had the belt on them. So what happened was in 1963, the military started experimenting with issuing out to special forces and stuff like that, different little groups, what were called jungle uniforms or jungle. They didn't call them fatigues yet. I think they were jungle uniforms, right? They were made out of a poplin olive drab material, kind of this color, and I'll get to what pattern this is in a second. It's a third pattern, but on the first pattern, which is actually I'm wearing the pants right now, so I'll try and get this in there. On the first pattern, you're going to have the leg ties like this, and imagine that the coat that I'm wearing is also a first pattern, and you have the buttons exposed on everything. So we're talking back pockets, cargo pockets, These pockets right here, your bottom pockets, all the buttons were exposed. There was a gas flap, so it's an extra layer of material in here for, they thought chemical warfare was still going to be a thing. And then you had two little button cinches on the waist, right kind of back here, that would allow you to cinch it up if you needed to, or to let it out if you also needed the room. So that was the first pattern, Jungle Fatigues. Those came out in about 1963. Okay, and then some improvements were made to the first pattern. Pretty much, I think it was in 1965 or 66. They came out with the second pattern. Oh, the first pattern also had shoulder epaulets. I forgot to mention that. And this is a very broad, kind of basic overview, so I don't go into the super details. This is like an overview of the three patterns, how many there were. Oh, spoiler alert. So in 1965 or 66, they came out with the second pattern, which was essentially a first pattern uniform with the buttons covered up, right? So you still have the shoulder epaulets, the gas flap, the little cinches in the back. Well, 1966 and 67 roll around, and they start realizing that you really don't need the epaulets. They get in the way, they get caught on shit. People don't use them for what they're supposed to be used for. The uniforms themselves are working well, but there's just added features that aren't necessary, right? So in 1967, pretty sure on that date, the Army decided to come out with the third pattern, which is what I'm wearing on the top. The third pattern, Jungle Fatigues. It's Coat Man's Poplin OD Wind Resistant is the name for it, right? And this is what remained through the end all the way until the 1980s, right? This is what they produced in the 60s and 70s, and then stopped producing them. But these were made by a bunch of different companies. And so you end up with mostly third patterns is what you're going to find. The first and second patterns are really hard to find. These pants are a reproduction from more militaria. They stopped making reproduction uniforms, which sucks. I wanted to get a set of second patterns, but whatever. Anyway, these pants are cool. So the third pattern is going to be your most common. That's the ones that I'm selling right now in my shop. I'm sure by the time you watch this video, those have been long gone. As I'm making this, they're still available in large long on the site, unissued. And yeah, so you get the third pattern, Jungle Fatigues, right here. Those were the three patterns that were worn by U.S. military personnel in Vietnam, like the standard olive drab. We're not talking about the ERDL or any of the other shit, which was made in the same pattern, but a different material, different color. And about 1967 or 68 too, I forgot to mention, the uniforms went from being made from poplin, just straight up poplin, to this ripstop material. If you've never seen ripstop before, it's got, there's a lot of cat here. Let's see if you can see this. There's a lot of little squares like in the material. It's what modern uniforms are made out of. And so that was an advantage, I guess. But albeit these uniforms were 100% cotton, they were also cut bigger than the fatigues at home to allow for more airflow and just comfort and stuff like that. They get wet, they dry easier because you got airflow. So the uniform was actually being tailored to jungle warfare, and it actually worked pretty well. Again, this is my favorite uniform that the United States military has ever fielded. I think that we should still be wearing this because they're really comfortable. They're efficient, and I like the look of them. I think they look pretty professional and cool. They look rugged like Americans are, but yet they look like a military uniform. Anyway, my opinion aside. So those are the three patterns. If you had any questions on those, because you can see pictures, and if you see pictures with the buttons exposed, that's going to be a relatively earlier picture. But again, if you get a box of first patterns, nobody gave a shit. It was a uniform. You throw it on, you go and wear it out in the field and ruin it because it's a uniform. So I mean, you see guys, just like in World War I Germany or pretty much any war, you see guys wearing second pattern pants with third pattern tops and first pattern tops with third pattern pants, and all the, it's whatever they could get a hold of that was in their size was what they would wear. Now, less of the second pattern and the first pattern were made, as I think I said already, because the amount of years wasn't that much. This was made from 67 to I think 75, 74. Maybe 73, I don't know, but it's a stretch of years that's much longer than the first and second. So anyway, I'll try and keep this rather short, but I just wanted to kind of start out the Vietnam War series on the channel and kind of start talking about the micro level stuff. So the US wore three different patterns of jungle fatigues. That's the only uniform we're talking about, these things, in Vietnam. So that's all I got. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell if you can, and if it does anything anymore. Also, you can support the channel directly. The link to that is in the description if you would like to. And yeah, otherwise I just appreciate you watching. I'll leave the comments open. Let me know if you got any questions or if you learned something cool. I really appreciate that. I am not an expert by any means. I just do research, and Vietnam's been a very important topic. And I think World War II, World War I, and Vietnam, the Vietnam War, are the three U.S. wars that I really am into the most as far as historical research. Korea would be a close fourth, but I don't know a lot about that. Nobody really does. Forgot more. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll look forward to seeing you commenting on this video, and look forward to seeing more videos on this series. Thanks.